So the first thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead and clone the starter repository. And this is something that you can do from scratch if you wish. It's mainly just a prettier config, some ECMAScript linting, and the Tailwind configuration. It's fairly straightforward to do on your own, but I figured I'd go ahead and save you the 5 minutes that it would take to actually do this. So yeah, open up your terminal wherever you want to start the project. In my case, it's in my dev/tutorials folder. And here I'm gonna, this is assuming that you have Git installed and that you have a, well, using whatever terminal of your choice. I like to use Bash for Windows. So I'm gonna run git clone, and then I'm gonna paste that link that I just got from GitHub. And then to rename this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm just going to do space, and then I'm going to rename it as my UI components. And we're going to hit enter. And there we go. Now if I hit ls, which lists the items in this directory, I'm going to see my UI components. So I want to go ahead and open this so that I can start installing the packages and writing code. So to do that, shorthand is assuming that you have VS Code installed and you configured it to open folders using the code command. I'm going to type code and then my. Now, one of the shorthand tricks that I like to do is if I know the contents of a directory, which in this case I do, what I'll do instead of typing out the whole thing, I'll just type M and then tab. And since this is the only item in the directory, I can actually just hit tab and it'll automatically select that item. So what this is going to do is this is going to open VS Code. This is going to open this folder, in VS Code. So I hit enter, and now we have the folder. So I'm just going to say, yes, I trust the authors. I am the authors. And so now I don't actually need this terminal anymore. So I am going to go ahead and close it. And I'm going to open the integrated terminal in VS Code. And this is something that you can also configure. So to do that, the shorthand, or the shortcut I should say, is Control tilde or Control backtick for Windows. I don't know what it is on Mac because I don't use a Mac. So I have it configured to use, again, Bash for Windows as my integrated terminal. I prefer the Linux commands over the Windows commands myself. And here, I first need to install the packages. So I'm going to run npm I, which is short for install. So what this is going to do is this is going to look in my package JSON, and it's going to install all the packages that are listed here. So the packages being dependencies and the dev dependencies. And it's going to install them in a new folder that will appear here in a second called the node modules folder. So I'm going to hit enter, and it might take a second to actually get going. There we go. You'll see the node modules folder show up. And what the node modules folder contains is all the dependencies and those dependencies' dependencies. And to kind of show you what that nightmare looks like, it's a whole lot of stuff. So this is not something that you want to be sending around. It's usually, node modules folders are usually fairly hefty. So typically you would list this in the git ignore, which I have already done, or I should say the Vite starter has already done. So yeah, now that we have the packages installed, I want to actually be able to start writing code. And in order to do that, well, I want to see the output of the code that I'm writing, I should say. And in order to do that, I need to actually start up my local server. And what that's going to do is that's going to open up a port on my local machine, and it's going to just serve the bundled content to my, well, for lack of a better way to explain it, or for lack of a nuanced way to explain it, it's going to allow me to basically access the local development build in my browser. So I'm going to run npm run dev. And this script is actually provided by the Vite build tool. And all it does is it's just shorthand for running npm run Vite, which is the bundler and optimizer that we're using for this project. So, whoops. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And you'll see that it's saying Vite is running on my localhost port 5173. So I'm going to go ahead and open that. I'm going to hit Alt click, and you can see that I've already done this several times. Yikes. So yeah, there we go. We now have the application running on our local server. And I'm just going to split screen view this so that it's easier for me to understand what I'm doing. There we go. Okay, so now that we have our local server up and running, we're going to go ahead and start adding in our components. So we're going to head to the source folder and into app.tsx. And this is, you might notice that the content on the right looks very similar to the content that is in the other, and that's because this is where that content gets populated. So let's see, we're just going to go ahead and get rid of everything. Yeah, I'll keep the title, and we're going to go ahead and start adding in our buttons components. So I'm going to get rid of this hello world. I'm going to say, instead of hello world, we're just going to put buttons as the title for now. And you'll see that it updated it to buttons. And that's the hot module reloading at work that's provided by Vite. So let's go ahead and start adding in these buttons. So we're going to have 3 variants. We're going to have a primary button. And this is for buttons that represent primary actions, like when you're looking at a form and it says submit. That's usually where you'd use a primary button. We're going to have our secondary buttons. So secondary buttons are things like if you have the same form that we're talking about. So if submit is your primary action, cancel would be your secondary action, for example. And the last one is tertiary buttons. Good Lord, I can't spell this word. Tertiary button. And these are for when you want to have like buttons that basically act as like links, like a learn more or something like that, where you want to have them there, but they're not for any specific like user actions. They're more for like non-obvious, non-intrusive actions. So yeah, now that we have these kind of outlined, let's go ahead and start writing in the JSX. And JSX is essentially the React representation of HTML is the best way that I would put this. So it looks like HTML, smells like HTML, reads like HTML with a few caveats, but it's really it's just syntactic sugar that will get compiled down into JSON objects. But this lets us have a more familiar developer experience when writing React apps. And you can learn more about that. I'll probably link some videos on that topic or some articles in the description. So let's go ahead and start adding in these buttons. So we have our primary button, and we're just going to say button, and we're going to have the text in there, say primary. When we save, you'll see that we have an unstyled thing over here. Now, this does not have the standard HTML look and feel to it because we are using Tailwind. So if I were to go into the index.css and if I were to comment out the Tailwind, I'm pretty sure, yep, there we go. It'll automatically just get rid of all the Tailwind styles. So even the base styles. So now this is what a primary HTML, this is what excuse me, an out-of-the-box HTML button typically looks like. But because Tailwind styles basically reset everything, it will just appear as text. Why did that comment again? Oh, I didn't select it. Okay, let's undo, save, and there we go. So let's just go ahead and close this. So I'm gonna hit Control W to close that tab. So now let's start adding in some styles so this actually looks like something that you can click on. So for the styles that we're gonna add, I'm gonna start from the layout. So we're gonna say that the button is going to have a flex container inside of it. So we're going to say inline flex. And what this class does, oh my gosh, I forgot to add the class name. Sorry, I had COVID this week, so my brain is not working too well. So we're going to add class names. And in HTML, this is just called a class, but because class is it can be a conflicting keyword in JavaScript, I think that's the rationale for why they use class name attribute instead of class, but I could be wrong. So like if I actually just try to use class, it will work, but it'll scream at you in red and it'll say that does not exist on the type. It'll still work, but it's gonna throw this error at you and it's kind of annoying. So I'm just gonna Control Z that, and then I'm gonna come in here. Actually, I don't know if that'll work. I'll test it in a second. So let's go ahead and add back our inline flex. And if I hover over this, because I have the Tailwind extension added to my VS Code, it actually tells me what the CSS that this class name is providing. So you see that it's basically just saving us the hassle of having to go in and write this in index.css. So yeah, so the reason we're adding an inline flex is just keep the button in line with the other elements, and it allows the internals of the button. So whatever we put inside the button, whether it's text or whether it's anything else. So if I were to come in here and I were to, I don't know, add an icon, which I don't have access to right now, I'll just say a p tag. So for some reason I want to put a paragraph tag saying, I don't know, we'll put button. And if I were to get rid of inline flex, this is what it would look like. So it'd be like a double story button, right? But when I come in here and I do inline flex, it will actually put them right next to each other. So it's kind of a little neat thing to kind of keep everything in line with one another. So then we want to kind of, since we added a flex box, we're going to go ahead and just make sure that across the board, whatever is added inside the button, whether it's text, icons, whatever, that we're adhering to like a straight, Lord, I cannot speak today, that everything is centered vertically and horizontally. So we're going to add an items center, and we're going to add a justify. Oh my gosh, center. I cannot type today. So if I save that, nothing really changed because everything's already been centered since this is just text. Now we do want to have a little bit of space between the things that are inside the button. So this is where we'd add a gap. So we're going to say gap 2, and you'll notice that it automatically added a little space between the word primary and the paragraph button. Next, let's go ahead and add some color to this thing because it is pretty bland right now. Well, it's actually invisible. So we're going to give it a background of, well, my favorite color is green. So we'll say emerald. Did I spell emerald right? Let's try that again. Background. Emerald. I think that's right. 500. Yep, there we go. And we save, and look at that. Automatically gives it a nice green color. So it does look kind of ugly, being so squarish. It doesn't really look like a button. So let's give it a border first of all, which we'll come back to later. But we also want to make it rounded, so that it looks a little bit more like, oh, there we go. Look at that. So it's already starting to look more like a button. Now let's also add, I'm going to add a border transparent, and I'll come back to this later, but the reason I'm adding a border transparent is because eventually when we do have different themes where a border will be available, whether it's in light mode or dark mode, or if it's in different buttons, this just prevents it from resizing when themes change. So it just adds like a transparent border there that will always be there. You'll just never see it. but when the theme changes, it'll prevent like your layout from shifting because suddenly you have a border where before you didn't. And that'll make more sense later on. So now that we added that, let's go ahead and give it a little bit of space because it's a little bit claustrophobic right now. So we're going to give it some horizontal padding of 4, and I believe this equates to, equates to 1 rem, or 16 pixels. So when I save, look at that, it gives it a little bit of breathing room. And we also want to give it some vertical padding. So we're saying padding in the Y direction with a value of 3. And there you go, looks a little bit better. Let's give it a text styling. So we'll say text small. So it's starting to look a little bit cleaner. We'll give it a medium font. So we do that. And I don't like the black on the green. I think that it should be white. So let's do text white. So that'll just give the text a white color. Let's see. We also want to have some kind of hover effect because when you're hovering over this, you don't really know, other than like the mouse over, like the pointer, you don't really know that you're actually that this is something that you're about to click on. So we do want to give it some hover styling. So we'll say hover, and then we'll just give it a darker emerald color. So we'll say background emerald, 600. And now when we hover over it, it gives it a darker emerald color. So let's also add some focus styling. So first thing we want to do is I don't want this black outline. So what I'm going to do to get rid of that, so the way I focused on it is I just clicked anywhere and then I hit tab and it automatically focuses on that. And then if I hit enter, it's actually clicking it, or space, I think. So let's give it an outline of none because I don't like that black outline being there. So now when I'm tabbing over it, nothing's actually happening. But I do want something to show up, and that's where we use the Tailwind class of ring. And I really like this class. I think it gives elements like this a lot more pop. So we'll go ahead and say on focus, we'll give it a ring. And what this is going to do is when I tab over it, ooh, you see that? It's like I don't know. It gives it a little bit more like I don't know how to explain that. Like you know when you open a can of Coke and it's like that. I don't know. That's kind of the feeling that it gives me. But yeah. So this is essentially just adding these like these special Tailwind class variables and stuff. It's pretty standard when using Tailwind to add ring to buttons. And you see that in like most apps that use Tailwind. I personally just like it because I think it looks a lot cleaner and a lot more standard than the outline. The outline just seems like a little cartoonish. So we're going to go ahead and add a color to this focus. So actually, I don't want the ring to just be hugging the button. I want to give it a little bit of space, a little bit of breathing room. So now that I added a -2, if I tab over it, it's a little bit bigger, but we want to offset it a little bit as well. So what that means is I'm going to come over here. I'm going to say ring offset, and we'll give it an offset of 2. And now you'll see that it actually has a little bit of space between the ring and the actual element. And now I don't like that Carolina blue color. I want to make the color standard with the button. So we'll say focus, ring, emerald, what was it, 500? 500. There we go. And now you see that the ring is standard with the color of the button. Looks kind of nice. And yeah, if I do say so myself. Oh, and then one more thing. I don't really like when you hover over something and it immediately changes color. So I want to add a CSS transition. So what I'll do is I'll just say transition all. And what that's going to do is when I hover over, now it kind of like fades in and fades out. So yeah. So there you go. It's the primary button. All right. So let's go ahead and start getting these secondary and tertiary buttons in there. So we have secondary, and I'll add the tertiary after I'm done here. So for the secondary, let's see, we're going to give it an inline flex item center, justify center, give it a gap of 2, rounded, whoa, that is not spelled right, gap of 2, same rounding, but we'll give this one a border with a width of 2, and we'll give it a gray border. So now when we hit save, you can kind of see how it's shaping up. Let's give it some horizontal and vertical spacing. So we'll say a horizontal spacing of 4, a vertical spacing of 3 again, and small text, fonts medium, and this time we'll give it we'll give the text color that nice emerald green color. I forgot the dash. There we go. So when we save, looks kind of like that. Let's see, we need to add that transition back in for the hover. So we'll say transition all. Now when we hover, what we'll do is we'll give the border a emerald color. So now when we hover over this, ooh, look at that. You can kind of see the border turns green. But we also want the rest of the button to turn green as well. So we'll say background, emerald 500. So now it kind of looks like that, but now you can see the text disappears. So to fix that, we'll do when you hover over, the text becomes white, and we'll give it the same focus styling, focus outline of none, focus ring 2, focus ring emerald 500, focus ring offset 2. Save. And now I don't know how I feel about that ring. It's a little bit bigger. So what we'll do is for the Y padding, I'm going to give it a slightly smaller padding size. So we'll just say 0.688 rem. And now, yeah. So now it's like kind of in line. Yeah, it's close enough. Before it was like a little bit, just like, I don't know, maybe it's just my eyes, but it's just a little bit taller than this button, and that's going to drive me nuts. So just to keep it in line, 0.688, that's just a number that I have memorized from doing this so much. But yeah, so now they kind of look nice and uniform sitting next to each other. So now let's go ahead and add the tertiary button. So we'll say button tertiary, spelled it right the first time, nice. And for this one, let's go ahead and add the class names. Again, inline flex, items center, justify center, gap 2, rounded MD, border transparent, px4, 4py, so y padding of 3, small text, medium font again, and this time text emerald of 500, so similar to the secondary button, so it kind of looks like that. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to give this an underline. So we'll say underline with an offset of 4. Did I forget something? Ring, offset, white, transition, all, hover, text, emerald, we'll say 700. And to answer that question, I did forget something. it was that I need to actually add that underline when you hover over. So now when you hover over, would you look at that? Okay. And we'll say no outline on the focus. Again, focus ring 2 and focus ring, oh my gosh, emerald 500, focus ring offset 2. Save that. So now it has that same ring that the other buttons have, but it looks and behaves more like a link than an actual button, but it's still a button, so you can use it as a button. It'll just look like a clickable link. So yeah, those are our 3 main buttons. Okay, so let me just clean something up real quick. Let me get rid of this extra paragraph because we don't need that. And I want to make it easier to kind of see these so they're not shoved up right next to each other. So I'll address this later in a more in a cleaner way, but for now we'll just add a horizontal break, and we'll give it a class name so that it has like a Y margin of 3, and this is only because I don't feel like adding a container and doing all this stuff. Lord, I cannot do this right now. There we go. So what this is going to do is just going to add like a little line and it stack the buttons instead of having them be in line right next to each other. So add another one down there, and there we go. We have a nice little separation between our buttons. So now let's go ahead. Let's just add like a little bit of like different cases to these buttons. This is just for completion's sake. You might not want to do this, but for example, like let's say if you want to have a delete action, like you have a, I don't know, you want to, like, let's say you're working at GitHub and you want to, or you're recreating GitHub and you want to recreate the delete this repository form, where when you have a certain destructive action, you kind of want to show the buttons in different colors to kind of indicate, hey, this is going to do things that you may not want, but just in case, here's a red color to indicate that this is something that's destructive. So to do that, we're going to recreate these primary, secondary, tertiary buttons using a destructive color scheme. And to do that, what I'm going to do is for each of these, so I'm going to, for each of these, sorry, my touchpad is a little bit not touchy, or maybe it's too touchy. So we're just going to copy this primary button, and let's just, so that they appear next to each other, I'm just going to add a span. Oh, and one of the ways that you can kind of like, instead of having to add a class name to every element, is you can just like type the element name and then dot, and then you can type out the classes. So I'm going to add a inline block and give it a width of 4. So this is just going to be like a horizontal separator between this button and the new primary button that I'm going to add. So when I paste that there, I'm going to call this primary destructive. And I'm going to repeat that up here in this comment, destructive, and we're going to save. You'll notice it's like, well, that's not very oops. That's supposed to be a dash. Okay, now we got the space. Cool. So we want this to look a little bit more destructive, because right now it ain't looking too destructive. So let's go through it. So we have the same inline flex. We have the centered items. We have all this kind of stuff. But let's go ahead and change the colors. Dude, this pop-up is getting on my nerves. Oh my God. Okay, so I'm just going to Control D where these emeralds show up, and I'm going to change them to red. And when I save, well, look at that. Now we have a nice little red color. And yeah, so now I'm going to go ahead and do the same exact thing with the secondary. So just add that spacer here. Copy pasta. Nice. Secondary destructive. Secondary destructive. Okay. And for this one, we want to do the same thing that we just did. Wherever we had emeralds, we just want to change these to red. So now when we hover over, it does the same thing, but in red. And then for the last one, it's going to be a little bit different because with destructive tertiary actions, like with links and stuff like that, you typically, the whole idea behind tertiary is you don't want it to like stand out. So you kind of want it to be like something that chills in the background and it's like, hey, I'm a non-obvious thing, but I'm still a thing. So we'll do destructive and we'll say did I spell that right? Destructive. Yeah, there we go. Okay. But the problem is, like I said, we want this to be something that is non-obvious. The problem is that red, super obvious. So what we're actually going to do is we're not going to make this red. Rather, we are going to make it gray. Dude, that's not what I'm trying to click on. So I'll just undo that and we'll do gray with an A. And yeah, so there you go. It's a nice little destructive tertiary button that is non-obvious. So it kind of hangs out there. It's like, yo, don't notice me. But if you do end up noticing it, you can click it and it will do a destructive action. Well, I say it will do, but you know, that's all code that has to actually be written. But that's the idea. So this is how you would implement the destructive variants of the primary, secondary, and tertiary buttons. All right, so let's go ahead and start getting our next component in here, which is our card. So for those who are unaware, a card kind of looks like this. This is Bootstrap's documentation. So if I look up card, so this is basically an example of what a card is. So like you can have like your image at the top, you can have like heading, some text, you know, some actions, all this kind of stuff. So for our case, we're just gonna have we're just gonna recreate like a simple card, like this that has like a heading, some links and stuff like that. And then we're gonna like have one that has like the featured thing at the top, and then the footer thing at the bottom. Just to like give some like you know various examples. Oh, and we'll do like I think there's one that isn't actually here. It's called a block link. So it's like where the whole card is clickable as a single link. This is close, but it's not clickable. But yeah, you'll see. I tend to use those myself a lot, so I figured it's a nice little thing to add in here. It's basically a huge like card button, so to speak. So to get started with that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna duplicate this container that we added the buttons to, just to have it there. And the way I did that is I just highlight the whole thing and then I hit Alt Shift down, and that saves me the Control C, Control V action. So now I'm just gonna collapse this again, expand this one, change this to say card, cards with an S, and we'll get rid of everything that is inside here. My scroll is acting crazy today. I'm also gonna nope, wrong one. I'm gonna minimize the terminal because it's taking up a little too much space. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and start creating this first card, which is just gonna be a simple card. And down here, the way we're gonna build this is we're gonna have this like outer div container. Actually, here, tell you what, instead of doing it that way, I'm gonna do it with the dot shorthand. So the way that works is I can type div. Well, I might have already explained this earlier, so sorry if I'm repeating myself. But for repetition purposes, I'm adding a div, and then to add classes immediately, I just press dot. And if I hit enter, it'll just create a class name with empty quotes, and it'll automatically put the cursor in that quote, but I actually want to have classes in there first. So we'll say that this div has a full width, but it has a maximum width of this like predefined Tailwind width, which is x small. And what this means is it's gonna always try to fill up whatever space it occupies. So whatever the card is placed into, it'll fill up the space, but only up till a certain point. So that's useful if you have like small containers where you want the card to always be the maximum size. But then when you like full screen and you have like a huge container, then you don't want the card to take up all the space. So you cap it at this x small width. And what that x small is, if I highlight over this, it's 20 rem. So it's just a predefined size from Tailwind. So now that we have that outer div, we're going to go ahead and add another div that is going to have the actual, the top one is like for the sizing. And then inside, we're actually going to add in the styling for the card container itself. So the card is going to have rounded borders. So for this one, before we did rounded medium, and that gave us this like, you know, kind of rounded button structure. But with the XL, this is going to give us a nice like thick border radius. And so yeah, we're giving it a rounded XL. We're going to give it a dot border, excuse me. And then we're going to give it a white background because we don't want it to be transparent. If the card is transparent, then whatever's behind the card is going to like show up as the background. So if you have the card on like say a blue background, then the contents are going to be kind of hard to read because the card is also going to be blue. But we want the card to stand out. So in this case, the background is going to be solid white. And then we're going to give it a shadow to kind of like give it the appearance that it's like sitting on top of its background. So there we go. We'll just give it a small shadow. Press enter, and then we'll save, and well, it looks like nothing. But that's because there's nothing in it. So let's start adding some stuff. So let's add another div. This is going to be a flex container with a vertical stacking behavior. So we'll give it a flex column class, and then we'll give it a padding of 4. So padding is all the spacing between the border of the div and its contents, as opposed to margin, which is the border of the div and its parent, right? So it's a nice little way to think about it. Always like keep it in mind is like margin is the spacing between the thing that I'm currently defining the margin on and it's anything outside of it. And padding is the spacing between the border of the thing that I'm currently defining and its children. And that'll make more sense as we do this like a few hundred times. So now what I also want to do is like I want the padding to be a little bit bigger on bigger screen sizes. So what I'll say is when we hit a medium screen size breakpoint, which I think is like, well, let me not guess off the top of my head, but this is like for like tablets and such. So when it's at a certain screen size, it'll actually, instead of using a padding of 4, I'll have it use a padding of 5. And now if I hit save, well, look at that. We're starting to have some kind of container action. Isn't that fun? But there's nothing in it. So let's start adding some stuff. So first thing we're going to add is the header. So for the header, whoops. Oh my gosh, Control Z, excuse me. For the header, let's give it a large text. So we'll say that. And the reason I'm using H3 is because I don't want, H1 and H2 are typically used for like links, like things on the page that can be linked to. I still want the appearance of a header, but I don't want it to be like a linkable header. So that's why I'm using H3. So we're using large text. We'll make it bold. And I don't want it to be black because like black text always is a little bit too much. So we'll just give it a really, really, really dark gray color. We'll say gray 800. And then here we'll just say card title. And there we go. There's our card title. So it's not, it's like almost black, but it's not like actually black. Just close enough. So now that we have the header there, let's go ahead and add some text content underneath that. So we'll add a paragraph tag. We'll give this a top margin. So remember, the margin is the space between the element and its the stuff outside of the element, which in this case would be the header. So I guess sibling is a is a better way to put it. So not necessarily the thing in its parent, but the thing in its sibling. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense, I think. Well, now I'm having an existential crisis. But yeah, so we'll give it a top margin of 1, and we'll give it a small text size. So actually, we'll give it an X small text size because we don't want it to be. It's just a subtitle, right? We don't want it to be like too crazy. So we'll give it a medium font. Oh my lord, medium, and we'll make it all uppercase because that's how subtitles tend to be. And we'll give it like this non intrusive, I don't know if that's the right word, gray color. So it's like more of a medium gray. So now I'm going to come in here, I'm going to type card subtitle, and there you go. That's the subtitle. So last thing we're going to add is a little link. Actually, no. First, yeah, we need some content in here, actually. What am I saying? So let's give it another paragraph tag, and this time we'll give it a top margin of 2, so a little bit more space. And we'll give it the same dark gray color as the heading. And I think I'm just gonna grab the text from Bootstrap. Like they use across all of their cards. So I'm just copying for that from my other screen. So we're just going to paste that there. Some quick example text to build on the card title and make a bulk of the card's content. So we save and look at that. We got some text. And last thing, what we want to add is a little link. So we're going to add an A tag. We're going to give it a top margin of 5. Okay, cool. I just wanted to check something. So we'll give it a top margin of 5. We'll make it so that the link is always in line. Items center. Give it a gap 2, so it's gonna look kind of like our link, our tertiary button from above. Gap -2. What am I doing? Give it a small text, so text small. We'll give it medium font. Cool. We'll give it the emerald color that we so very much love, and we'll give it a little bit of hover action, so that when you hover over it, well, you know that it's something that can be clicked. Whoa there, what just happened? Oops. I accidentally hit my trackpad. So hover text emerald, where was I? 700, enter. And for the link itself, I'm just going to do a hash, which is it's going to be like, it just means like here. So if you ever click on it, it'll just take it to the top of the page. And then the content of the A tag is going to be, I don't know, card link. Save. And there we go. Look at that. Card link. Cool. So the only difference between this and our tertiary button is that it's not underlined on the hover. So yeah, that now we have our card, our first card. Ain't it pretty? Okay, so before we move on and we keep adding more components, I want to address like the hideous layout that we have going on over here. So this works fine. Like if you have like a full screen and you want to center the content inside of it, hashtag how do you center a div? But that's not. This is kind of ridiculous. Like it looks terrible, right? Because these components are like smashed right next to each other. I definitely don't want the contents of this card to always be centered. So yeah, we want this to look a little bit more presentable. as you would expect from, say, a documentation site. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go to the top of the file, and we're going to start working on the container. So I'm just going to minimize these two containers. So these are the ones that have our buttons and our cards. Excuse me. And for the top container, what we're going to do, I'm just going to get rid of all the classes. If that pop-up would get out of my face. There we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to give it a relative class, going to give it a flex box, and what we're going to do is we're going to say that this is always going to be the height of the screen, and this will be really useful later on when we add a nav bar to this site. So we're going to say we're going to give the page always. We're going to make sure that the page is always like 100% like vertical height. So it's never going to be like, you're never going to have an issue where like if the stuff is vertically centered like over here, for example, this ensures that the page is always the maximum height allowable. Oh, and because this is a flex box, so if I hit save, it'll like shove everything up there, and I don't want that. I want things to be stacked vertically. So I'm gonna give it a flex call, and now, yikes, it still looks terrible, but at least things are stacked vertically. So the next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna add another container in here, and this is gonna make a lot more sense later. But we'll do, another shorthand, by the way. If you're gonna do a div, so this only works for div, but if you're gonna add a div, you can just hit dot enter and it'll create a div. Or in our case, dot flex1 and it'll create a div with a flex1 class. And what the flex1 class does is it basically makes sure that whatever content is inside of this div grows so it fills up the space of this container. And again, this isn't something that like you're not gonna see the effects of this now. I just wanted to get this in now, rather than later, because this is gonna come in useful again when we add the nav bar at a later time in the tutorial. So all I did right there was I added the closing tag to the basically the like right before the closing tag for the outer div, because I want this to be the container. I want this to also contain the components. So there we go. Now I need to add yet another container, and this time we're just going to add a main class. And there really is like no huge difference between a main and a div. It's just HTML semantics. This is for like accessibility, like screen readers and such. So, and this is just, it's basically saying this is the main content of the page. So we're going to add a main. We're going to give it a padding of, I don't know, we'll say 10. But on small screens, we'll have it such that the padding in the X direction is 16. And then on large screens, the padding in the X direction is 44, I guess. So what this means is the padding is always going to be 10. So anything smaller than the small screen size. Oh, yikes, I should have added a dot here, not a space. So anything smaller than the small screen size will always have, wait, what? Did I miss something? Oh, I think it does it based on where you hit enter. Okay, cool. Now it did it. So it'll basically add a padding of 10, which in this case is 2.5 rem, to all screen sizes, both in X and Y direction. When you hit the small screen breakpoint, which is 640 pixels, it will add an X padding. So it won't change the vertical padding. It'll change the horizontal padding to 4 rem. And then when you hit the large screen, it'll change the horizontal padding to 44 rem. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. So we're just going to add that main closing tag out here. And yeah, so that's kind of what that looks like. So now if I come over here and if I expand this, you'll see, oh, there you go. You see where it snaps. So this is small to large. And once it hits the large screen size, it automatically adds that bigger padding. And then if I go down smaller than small, which I don't even know, there it is, it went down to padding of 10. So it just hit small, padding of 16, and hit large, padding of 44. So yeah, that's kind of how that works. So now let's, and I'm sorry if I sound like a cartoon character. My voice is gone from being sick. So let's add one more, excuse me, one more container. And for this last container, it's going to be a div with a horizontal margin of auto. We're going to give it a max width of 3XL, and we're going to add a spacing between all of the children, vertical spacing, I should say, of 20. Huh. Oh, that should be a space. There we go. And that div appears above the main. And I'm going to go ahead and save this, and there you go. So the last thing is I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of this text center, because we don't actually need it. Let me just make sure these are the only ones that exist here. So just do a control find for this. Yeah, those are the only two. Okay, so another pro tip, instead of having to, like, let's say you want to get rid of all the instances of this thing on a page, instead of having to control D through everything, like if you're certain you want to get rid of this across the board, then you can just hit control shift L, and that'll select all of them, and then backspace. And then if I save, and look at that, now everything is left justified as it should be. The card content is correct. The buttons aren't affected because we centered them inside the buttons. So yeah, this is the desired state for the outer container, and I do think it looks a lot nicer this way. So yeah, now let's go ahead and excuse me. Let's go ahead and start adding the next card. So where we had simple card before, I'm actually just gonna copy. Well, you know what? We'll do it from scratch again. Why not? So let's actually add that breakpoint that we had between the buttons. So I'm just gonna grab this. I'm gonna go over here, and instead of simple card, we're gonna say simple card with footer, and well, let's do header first actually. So start with the header, and again div width full, max width of x small. Tell you what, I actually am just going to copy paste this because this is going to take forever. So we'll just paste that one there. And the only thing that's really changing here is rather than having, hold on, let me see how to best do this. So, so let's minimize this. So yeah, we're going to keep that content there. And we're going to add above it, we're going to add a div with a rounded top of XL. So this is gonna basically make it so that only the top of the container we're about to add is rounded. And I'll show you why we do that in a second. And then we're gonna give it a bottom border. Border dash B, not border dot B. And then we're giving a background of gray and padding in the horizontal direction, excuse me. goodness gracious, padding in the vertical direction. And then at the medium breakpoint, we're going to increase the padding in the horizontal direction to 5. And we're going to do the same thing with the vertical padding, where it'll be 4 at the medium breakpoint. So now when we hit save, you'll see it has that nice little top border. And like I said, the reason we added that T is because if I actually get rid of this, then you'll see it kind of, it's kind of hard to tell, but I'm going to zoom in here. It looks like a pill shape, and we don't want that. We only want it to be rounded at the top. So now, kind of like that. So this is basically like a tiny little like card sitting on top of the existing card. If I were to change the border radius to, instead of X large, say X small, it will look a little weird because that's a border radius of, does that even exist? X small doesn't even exist. Okay. So yeah, it's a border radius of nothing because we didn't provide a actual real border radius. So it's just a sharp edge. But when we do X large, there you go. It's kind of faking it, but it's a small little container sitting on top of the existing container. And this header looks a little weird without an actual like bit of content in there. So let's go ahead and fix that. So we'll add, a paragraph tag. Give it a top margin of 1. Give it small text. And we'll make that text gray. And we'll say, I put a space here because I'm a genius. And over here, we'll just say, I don't know, featured. I think that's the one that Bootstrap has. There we go. So yeah, it's a little bit of header action going on, no big deal. So last thing we want to do is I want to have this section be like its own section. So like basically the header or the footer or header and footer should be on the same section because they're like similar variants. So what I'll do is I'll copy that span that we were using earlier to kind of set these next to each other. And right over here, add that span. And then where we have a simple card with header, now, hello, that's huge. Let's minimize that again. Cool. So we'll say simple card with footer, and we obviously got to get rid of that header. So bye-bye. So yeah, let's go ahead and save that. All right. And there you go. There's the card without the header. But now we want to add the footer. So I'm going to add another div. We're going to give it another rounded border. This time it'll be rounded only on the bottom. I should have said rounded -b, xl.border. I also want to give it a top border, so border -t. We're going to make it have a gray background. So background gray 100. And we'll give it a horizontal padding of 4. We'll give it a vertical padding of 3. And then medium breakpoints, it'll have a X padding of 5. And on medium breakpoints, it'll have a Y padding of, I think it was 4 was what we went with before. So now down here, we'll add another, well, let me show you what it looks like real quick. So when I hit save, there you go. Made a little section at the bottom, or the footer, I should say. And then I'm going to add a P tag just so you can see what it looks like. So this is going to have a top margin of 1, small text, and the text is going to be that same gray that we used above. And we'll just, I think the example from Bootstrap was like, it was like a last updated thing, like when this content was last updated kind of footer. So we'll say last updated 5 mins ago. Save that. And there, wow, so professional. Looks so great, if I do say so myself. So yeah, there you go. There's your there's your new card variants. And the nice thing is, like, you can actually like double this up. So I'm gonna copy this one, and this is only for like demonstration purposes right now. I'm not gonna keep this in here because I think it's a bit much, and I think it's overkill. But this is just to kind of show you how like you can componentize this further. So what I can do is I can actually grab that header from the simple card of the header example. I can say simple card with header and footer. And then over here, where was it? Right above this flex box. I can paste that there. And now, look at that. You have a card with both a header and a footer. But I think that's overkill, so I'm just going to get rid of it. But it's just to kind of show you like how you can play around with this and expand it further and, you know, make it your own. So let me just make sure I didn't remove too much. Oh gosh, there we go. Yeah, save that. Cool. So there you go. There's your header and footer card variants. Okay, so now we want to add our last card variant. And this one is going to be the block link cards. So the way we're going to do these is, let's see, let's go ahead and add another horizontal break. I do want to hide this so I can see where it is. Yeah, cool. So we added that horizontal break line, and we'll add a comment here, and we'll just say, excuse me, we'll say these are block link card. Okay. Now in this block link card, what I'm going to do is, following the same structure as before, we'll say I think it was W full, and then max width of X small. Cool. So we have that container again. And we're going to go ahead and add in the second container, which is going to have the rounded borders. So background of white. We're going to give it gray text. We're going to give it a small shadow. Nope, not dot, dash, small. And I am going to add a transition here because this is going to be like, it's going to operate like those buttons that we made earlier, where when you hover over, it changes the color, but not like, you know, suddenly. It just kind of like fades in and out. So, and because I don't want to have like everything transition, I only care about the colors. Instead of doing transition all, I'm just going to say transition for the colors. And then we'll have a hover over effect, such that when you hover over the card, it changes the background color to gray. We'll say 200, but I'll give it an opacity of 50. So what that means is it'll be instead of having it be gray 100, which I believe is half of the grayness of 200, maybe, could be wrong. What the opacity of 50 is going to do is going to make it like slightly transparent, the hover over effect. So it'll make more sense when you see it. But it basically makes it transparent with its background, so the background becomes a little bit more obvious this way. Which in this case doesn't mean anything because the background is white. But yeah, so go ahead and save that. And then, yeah, I might as well go ahead and save that. So we save it, and it has nothing in it. So, so we need to actually add some content in here. So I'll add a link, so an anchor tag, and we'll give it a class name. We'll say it's a flexbox. I'll make it so that whatever you put inside this link, whether it's text or an icon or what have you, it'll stack vertically. So we'll give it a flex column, and then we'll center everything. So items center, and we'll give it a padding of 6 across the board, and then small screens. Oh my god, I typed ms, small sm, excuse me, small screens and up. We'll give it a padding of 10. That way, like on small screens, it's like, like on your phone or stuff, it's like it still looks like a block link, but it's not like huge. But then like above small screens where like you have like say a monitor or something like that, it's like still distinguishable as a block link and it like is an appropriate size. So we'll hit enter. And what we'll do for the href, for now, I'll just do a hash, so it'll just link to the current page. And then in the text, I'm gonna actually, so I want to do something interesting with the block links. I actually want to make them icon block links. So like we'll make these links to the Vite docs page and maybe the Next.js docs page. So I'm going to be using React icons. So we need to install this package. This is going to give us like access to a bunch of like different icon styles and stuff. And what we want specifically is we want the Vite icon. So I think this one looks nice. The SI Vite, I think that's simple icons. Is that what SI stands for? Let's see. Yeah, simple icons. So this is an actual like package. But React icons give us all the icons from all of these and all the different styles. So we'll do Vite, and then another popular React flavor is Next.js. So we'll do, I think it's like Next.js. So we'll do this one. And then to actually install these, or to get these, we need to like import them, which requires us to install them. So we're going to install React-icons. So here, back in your VS Code, hit Control tilde to show your terminal again. And you can actually cancel the build if you want, which will require you to restart your dev server again. But because Vite has hot module reloading, you actually don't need to stop your server. You can just hit the split terminal, and this will just open up a second terminal in the same directory. And I can actually install a new package, and it'll, like, Vite won't need to restart the server to use it. It'll just, like, work. So what I'll do is I'll run npm I react-icons. And what this is saying is it's telling npm to install the React icons package. Hit enter. It's going to take a second. And to show you like how that kind of works. Man, this is taking forever. Okay. Must be my internet. Yeah. So it'll show up in the package JSON once it's done. Yep, there it is. Added it right there. So there's React icons. I'm just going to close this terminal because I don't actually need it anymore. So just kill. Now, don't kill this one. Don't kill the first one. Kill the second one. So yeah, we'll just go ahead and get rid of that one. And now what I can do is I can actually import this the way they have it in their docs. And I'll do that by going all the way up to the top. I'll just add a few enters over here. Excuse me. And we'll paste that there. So now we have Next.js. I think the other one I wanted to use was Vite. So if I remember correctly, well, you know what? We'll just pull it for hello, not V8, Vite. There we go. So yeah, so it's SI Vite. So we'll import this and comma this. There we go. So now we have both icons, and oh my god, they have colors. That's really cool. Interesting. Oh no, it's just kind of showing you how they look with the colors. That's really nice. They updated their docs. I'm a fan. Okay, so we'll use these icons in the block link. And the way that's gonna look is, excuse me, we'll add them as React components. So you'll see they actually show up over here. So the first one that we'll do is Vite, since we are using Vite. And now if I hit save, there you go. There's a little block link card. But if I click it, it just takes us to the top. So I actually want it to navigate us to the Vite docs website, which is https slash slash, I think it's Vite. It's either Vite or Vite.js. I'm going to guess Vite.js.dev. Save that. And now if I click it, it takes us to Vite. Look at that, first try. It takes us to the Vite homepage. But I don't want it to take us to the homepage because I think it's bad UX when you click on a link, it just like navigates you away from where you are. I think it should add a new tab. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I probably am wrong. Everyone has like their own opinions on how these things work. I personally like it when it opens up a new tab because maybe I just want to see what this thing does, and I don't want to actually kill my session. So what I'll do to make it open up a new tab is I'll add a target attribute, and in the target I'll do underscore blank. And I don't know why this is like this, I just kind of learned it this way and it's always been like that. So now when I click on this, it'll open up a new tab. See that? And to close this tab, just hit Control W. So yeah, now we have the Vite card, but it looks kind of hideous because it's just like this tiny icon in here. So let's add some classes to it. Let's give it a, whoops, class, hello. There we go. Nope, not a colon. Equals, and we'll give it a height of 10 and a width of 10. And look at that, it looks so much fuller now. But I think you should have text whenever you have an icon just to indicate what it was, because not everybody knows what this is. This could be I don't know, a superhero emblem for, like, it looks kind of like the Flash. So you kind of want to let people know what it does. So, so we're gonna add a subtitle over here, or I guess a caption. Could probably say. Well, I shouldn't say caption because that's an actual HTML tag. So we'll give this a margin top of 2, and we'll give it a not font of medium. I cannot type. And we'll just say Vite. And look at that. So now it kind of looks official. So I'm just going to say block link card. And then in the comments over here, I'll say Vite. And what I'll do is I'll double this and give it to the next guy. Sorry, just kidding. I'll copy pasta that. And I'll change the Vite to next. So it's SI next.js, and because I already imported it, it shows up in my IntelliSense. I'll say next.js, and then for the website, I'm 90% sure it's like next.js. Ooh, is it com or org? Let's try com. Okay, click on it. Next.js.com does not exist, so it's org. Let's see. Nice, cool. So that link works. I'll just change this to say next.js, and we'll add a span over here so that they don't look too terrible. Again, well, oh, there it is. Just grab that, paste that there, and now they kind of have a little bit of space between them. Looks kind of nifty. Looks kind of nice. I can't complain one bit. So yeah, there we go. There's our final card variant. All right, so at long last, we are going to add our the last component for this, or the last component variant, I should say, for this tutorial, because we're not done adding components, but for the example purposes, I only really wanted to have like buttons, cards, and inputs. And, you know, this is something that the whole idea of this tutorial is to give you something to expand upon yourself later, to customize for your own needs. And there's plenty of examples of components that you can, and in my opinion should, add to any self-respecting component library. Plus, you know, it's always nice to have access to your own components that you understand in and out, make your own custom versions, so forth and so on. Let's go ahead, and I don't know why my keyboard is not working. Oh, there we go. All right, so let's go ahead and control this last section, paste that. I said control, I meant control C and control V. So I'm gonna get rid of everything inside. So what I just did is I copied the card section. To do this the easy way, well, I won't do it the easy way. I'll just minimize all these. I like to do things the easy way myself, but because this is a tutorial and I want to make sure it's understandable, or at least as understandable as a doofus like me can make it, I want to make sure I kind of walk y'all through all the different aspects. So we'll get rid of everything inside here. I'll keep the caption, why not? I'll keep that, or not the caption, excuse me, the comment. Change this to, I think, a really important one to learn starting out as inputs. So we'll do the inputs. And for our first example, we will just do a basic input. Excuse me. So now if I scroll down, there we go. We have our input section. Now, for our inputs, these are fairly straightforward, but they're very important to have in any component library, like I said. So what we'll do is for all my personal inputs, I like to input components. Excuse me. I like to contain them within a div, just because it makes it easier to extend the component itself, and I'll show you what I mean as we go forward. But yeah, so for the first containing div, I'm actually going to get rid of that, and I'm going to do div dot, because the shorthand is, well, easier because it's shorthand. So we'll do max width small, and we'll do space y3. So it's going to give it a max max width of small, so no matter how big the screen gets, it doesn't go crazy. And anything inside the div will have a space between it of 3. So that means that when we put our input here, which I'm going to do right now, say input, and for the input, I'm going to give it a block styling. We're going to give it a full width, so it's going to take up the full width of its container. We're going to give it rounded borders. We'll do rounded medium. We're going to give it a gray border, so border gray 200. We'll give it a horizontal padding of 4, not 3. We'll give it a vertical padding of 3, and we'll give it small text, and then we'll have it so that when you focus on it, the border is consistent with our buttons above, which in this case would be emerald because green's my favorite color. And we'll do the same thing with the ring. So that way there's a ring as well as a border. Did I spell emerald right? Yeah, cool, first try. So there we go. We added the input component. Where is the closing tag? Strange. I don't see it. It's not giving me errors, but it must be hidden. That's fine. Okay. So this is going to be an input of type text. So what that means is it's not going to do, like if you put an input of type email, your browser will actually validate it if it's not matching an email format. So in this case, it's just free text. So you can put whatever you want in there. So yeah, let's go ahead and save that. And, so it showed up, but it didn't show up. And the reason is this is actually an add-on from Tailwind. So we actually need to install the I think it's called Tailwind Forms package. So we're going to do npm I, and it is Tailwind CSS/forms, and I'm going to hit enter. And this is actually going to give us the styling to Tailwind's forms elements. So now that I have it installed, you'll notice nothing actually changed. And that's because I need to go into my Tailwind config, and I need to modify it to actually use the forms plugin. So what I'm going to do is at the top, couple spaces, and I'm just going to say import. We'll call it forms plugin, and it's going to be from Tailwind CSS/forms. And now that I import this, I just paste that into the plugins, save that, and would you look at that? My styling has now shown up because now we have access to the Tailwind forms styling. So last thing I want to add to this input is a placeholder. So for the placeholder, what we're going to do, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I was closing another tab. So for our placeholder, we'll say, I don't know, type things here. Save that, and there you go. Placeholder shows up, but when I click on this and I start typing, it goes away. Cool. So that's our basic input. And now I guess we can add a couple more inputs. So we have a basic one. Let's say, oh, sorry, something jumped in my face. Well, you know what? Before we go on from the basic one, let's show what a disabled one looks like. So, where is my? There it is. Okay, so just add this over here. Excuse me. And I'll just copy this whole thing because it really is just the same exact component with a twist. I'm actually going to copy the comment as well. And I'm going to paste that there. Whoa, that seems like it pasted a lot. Save. It's the same thing, but I want to disable it. So I'm going to say basic disabled input. And this is like, you would use this in like a case where, say, for example, you're not authorized to make changes to a specific input box, or it, like you have an input that's contingent on another input and you can only fill it in if the other one's been filled in. So, you know, you can have app logic that disables an input until otherwise it should be enabled, so forth and so on. So what we want to do here is we can literally just pass in the disabled attribute. And because I just passed it, so this is the same thing as me saying disabled equals true. And this is where you can put some logic. So like you can say like maybe a ternary operator. So some condition that you have defined elsewhere. If this some condition is true, then true, otherwise false. This is terrible. This is a terrible way to write logic, but it's just as an example. So you can pass conditions in here and stuff. You can say disabled false. So if I do disabled false, it'll actually allow me to type in here. If I do disabled true, it'll allow me to type in here. No, it won't because it's disabled. I have to refresh for it to clear. There we go. But instead of having to do all that, I can just say disabled and it'll always be disabled. So yeah. So I'm clicking on it and nothing's happening, but it looks the same as the one above. So I want to add like just a little bit of styling in there, so that it's like, you know, clear that it's disabled on first glance. So let's see, how are we going to do that? So we have essentially the same exact stylings, but what we'll do is we'll add something at the end. Well, I don't know why I pressed enter. Okay, we're struggling. Okay, so we'll say disabled. So it's the same thing where like you have your pseudo element focus. In this case, your pseudo element would be disabled. So if it's disabled, then you will do, I cannot speak today, pointer events of none. And what that means is like see when I hover over this input and it shows that I never know what to call this pointer, but it's like the text pointer. It's the same thing with oh, would you look at that? Huh. I always thought it would show it here, but maybe it doesn't. Interesting. Well, I learned something today, but maybe it's for cross-browser compatibility. Maybe that Chrome just knows how to act by default. That's probably what it is. So, but what we also want to do, regardless, is we want to add an opacity to this input box so that it looks disabled. So we'll give it an opacity of 50, and look at that. Looks a little bit harder to see, which is exactly what we want. So the last thing that I want to do is, hold on one second. So last thing I want to do is just change the placeholder here. So I'll just say disabled, and I am going to use the Emojipedia and grab the sad face because it's always fun to have expressive components. And there you go. So, if it wasn't obvious, now it's obvious. Yeah, so now that we have these two, we can actually move on to the, we're almost done with these inputs. There's only two more, and they're both kind of variants of one another. So the first one is going to be for the most part, it's going to be the exact same as this component over here. So it's just going to be a basic input with a twist. So let me do this actually. Let me copy the whole thing with the comment, and you can kind of tell like it's almost 200 lines of code. It's getting pretty hard to maintain, so we will be getting to that in a little bit, refactoring this so it's a little cleaner and easier to navigate. But right now what we're going to do is we're going to add a input that has a label. So we'll say input with label, and so we'll save that. So there you go, input with label. But what we want to do here is we want to actually leverage the space inside of this div to add a label component. I am going to get rid of the HTML4 because I don't want that by default, but there are places where it is appropriate and useful to have the HTML4 attribute in there. But for now, we'll get rid of it, and in this class, we're just going to add a margin at the bottom of 2. And the reason I'm doing margin bottom 2 here and not margin top here is because there are cases where you won't have a label. So if you don't have the label, it doesn't make any sense for there to be a margin here. But if you do have the label, you're never going to have a label without an input, because the whole purpose of this component is to be an input. So we add the margin to the label itself. So if it's not there, then the margin won't show up. So yeah, here we'll add a margin bottom. We'll give it a block. We'll give it small text, and we'll give it a medium font. So there we go. And we'll just put some placeholder text in here. So we'll make this an email input. So save that. So there you go. There's the label for this input. And inside of the input, I'll change this input type to email. And now if I come in here and there's no form, so it's not going to actually validate this, but oh, there you go. See, it said, please include an @ in the email address. It's missing @. So if I hit @ now it'll say it's incomplete. So I actually need to say something like gmail.com, and now the error goes away. So yeah, that's what happens when you add the email type. So what I'll do for the placeholder, because it doesn't make any sense to have this as a placeholder here, is I'll just change it to you@site.com, I guess. I think I've seen that example somewhere. So just to stay consistent with everybody else, we'll do that. So refresh, and there you go. There's the placeholder. So now let's do the same thing, but this time, rather than just having a label, well, let me actually grab the horizontal ruler. Cool. So now we'll do input with label and description. So For this one, it's going to be the same as before. So all the styles, everything is the same. But underneath the input, I'm going to add a p tag. Well, a p tag with styles. So again, like how I put the margin bottom on the label, because this should only show up if a label has been defined here. Same thing goes with the description, but not a margin bottom. It would be a margin top. So we'll add a margin top of 2, and we'll give it small text. And we will give it a gray 500 color. And here we'll just say something like something super reassuring that you'll always believe, which is like, we'll never share your details, because that's reassuring and you should totally trust a site when it just says that. So there you go. There are all of our component variants. We have a few buttons that have some nice little styling to them, have different use cases. We have some cards. We have some block link cards, which I love and adore. And we have some different inputs. So yeah. So up to this point, what we've been doing is, and I'm going to hit Control B real quick. Control B as in boy, just to hide the sidebar. So what we've been doing up to this point is essentially defining every single component like statically, or in less charitable terms, hard coding all the HTML and CSS for every component, which isn't really valuable in the grand scheme of things, because, well, you can't really reuse it. You would have to copy and paste the whole thing wholesale, right? And what we want to do is, like, the main idea here is to first define like the overall template. Like, this is what the standardized version of the component is going to look like. So for example, like this card, for example, this is a standardized card, right? But we might want to use this later on, and instead of having the Next.js icon and Next.js text, be able to pass in whatever, so that whenever we reuse these components, they adopt whatever parameters get passed into that component and reflect those. So yeah, so what we're gonna do is, starting back at the top, and the buttons are a great example of this because we have 6 of them. We're going to go ahead and we're going to start componentizing these buttons. And there's a few different ways to do this. I want to do it in the way that I think is simplest. And yeah, so I'll kind of explain that in detail as we go along. But what I want to do is, rather than create, so like right off the bat, like one would say, okay, so you're going to create a primary button component, a primary destructive, secondary. No, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a button component. So a button template. And later on, this can, and in my opinion should, be expanded such that you have variants of the button component. But for the sake of time and the sake of the tutorial, what we're going to do is we're basically going to abstract away all the common features from all these buttons into a single button component, then make them more unique. So the first step of this is to actually create a button component. So since we're using Tailwind, there is a package that we're going to need. Well, not necessarily we're going to need it, but it makes our lives a lot easier if we do have it. And that is going to be Tailwind merge. I cannot spell today. Excuse me. So what the Tailwind merge component does is, it basically it allows you to like concatenate multiple strings of classes, and it will basically detect duplicates, remove them, remove any, like if you have, let's say, py3, px3, it'll replace those with just p3 because it's the same thing. So it'll like shorten and simplify and optimize how you define your Tailwind classes. And it's from what I understand, the package exists specifically to benefit this kind of use case that we're about to go into right now. So now that we have Tailwind merged and installed, I'm actually going to hide the terminal because it's taking up way too much space. So typically, what I would do in this instance is I would define a component in its own file. But for now, just so that we're not like jumping all over the place, I'm actually going to define all of the components in this file and then refactor them later into their own individual files. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create that button component. So I'm just going to add some a comment over here, and I'm going to say button.tsx, and this is just a note for later to move this to a dedicated file that will be called button.tsx, and this is where we're going to move this code eventually. But for now, we'll leave it down here because you can have as many of these functional components in a file as you want. There's a few caveats here and there, but none of those caveats affect us in this instance. So what we're going to do is since we are using TypeScript, we are going to want to define our props or the type for our props. So, and this is the reason I chose TypeScript for this tutorial is when I started learning React, I learned with regular JavaScript, and JavaScript doesn't give you really good error handling in your IDE, and it's also not type safe. It's type safe-ish, but not really. It's very loosely typed. TypeScript doesn't get compiled in the browser. It all gets compiled as JavaScript, or it all gets like read in the browser as JavaScript. TypeScript is purely for development purposes. It helps you catch bugs early, and it helps you have better IntelliSense. So like when you hover over something, you kind of know what it is. This is by virtue of TypeScript. So yeah, like me hovering over the div right now, this is the types for this specific for this specific element, right? So we want to have that same functionality for our components. Plus, if you're gonna look for a job as a software developer, specifically anything related to front end, you're essentially going to be using TypeScript, unless you're working for like a startup that doesn't have time for type safety, or a company that doesn't really care. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to define the types for the props, that the button component will accept. So what this means is when we use the button component and we're going to pass things into it, what we need to define what the type of those things that we're going to pass into it is going to be. So to do that, we're going to define type, and we're going to call this type button props for obvious reasons. And we're going to set that equal. Now, because we're using Vite, React gets imported by default, so I don't actually have to go in and import the React package, I think. I've been wrong before. I could be wrong today. We'll see. So React, and from the React package, we're going to basically grab the button HTML attributes. And this is basically saying we're going to be grabbing all the types that come with the standard button HTML. And I'm going to pass in the HTML button element. So this is going to give us all the methods that come with the standard HTML5 button API. Yeah, so this is giving us an error because it's saying that it's defined but never used. And these are all things that you can tweak all the errors that show up in your IDE using ESLint. But I like having the code be as clean as possible. So if I'm not using something, I'd rather it not be there. And that's what this error is showing me. So now that we have the props type defined, we're going to actually define the component. So I would suggest that you use React snippets. So there is an extension. There's multiple extensions for React snippets. I think, I don't know which one I use. I think it's like, let's see. Yeah, so I use ES7 plus React Redux snippets. So I've been using this one for years. Yeah, it's 10 million downloads. It's pretty popular. So yeah, that's kind of what I go with. And what that lets you do is instead of me having to type in like actually like define the components myself, which I will do now just for the demonstration purposes, the snippets let me just do something like this where I can say React arrow function component, and then if I enter, it'll automatically provide me with a boilerplate for the component. But I'm going to do it from scratch just so that I can explain it. So as you might know, JavaScript has two main ways to define functions. One of them is using the const declaration, so the way you would define a object, and the other one is to actually use the function keyword. So in this case, Vite gives us this out of the box by default. So you have your app defined as a function, and it's the default export. So when this gets imported by another file, it gets imported as app, right? But in the case of what we're about to do, we don't want to export this as a default component. We just want to export it as a component. So what that would look like is we'd say export. So this says that this component can be imported by other components. And we're going to use the const declaration. And I prefer the const declaration. Everyone has their preference. This is just me personally. So, but I should say if you define a component like this, like if you say export const app equals, and then you make it an arrow function, this is actually not going to work because, oh, sorry. This is not going to work because you can only have like the export default function. If you define your function as a const, to make it the default export, you would have to do something like this. So export default app. There you go. So that's how you would do it if you use the arrow. This is an arrow function format syntax. So this is kind of like a little caveat there, but I'm just going to undo that real quick because it's not necessary, just for informational educational purposes. There we go. All right, so back over here. So we're going to export a button, and components, functional components are exactly what they sound like. They're components that are functions. They are stateless, and they have state provided to them either by props that are passed in or by using hooks, which are two concepts that I believe if you don't understand very well, you should probably take some kind of crash course in React, but it's not gonna break your flow today to not fully understand it because we're just following along. And for the most part, if you follow this structure, you should be good when you're starting out. So what I'm doing here is I'm defining the button as a React functional component, and I'm going to pass in the button props. So what this is basically saying is this functional component will accept button props. Sorry, it autofills whenever I close the tag. It's some extension that I have to help me write less HTML. So sometimes it gets a little excited and it does its own thing. So we're going to define this as an arrow function. And what that requires is I basically say const button equals, and then this is where I would actually pass in the props, or I would define what props are going to get passed in. So in this case, we want to pass in a name. So that means this will accept, a class name. This will accept a class name property when it gets used. And then we also want access to the rest of the props that get passed in. So in this case, that would be all of the button props that you would expect to be passed in to a HTML button. Because we're defining button props as an extension of the HTML button props, what this means is when our button gets used later on, not only will it accept the properties that we want, the custom properties that we want to pass in, which in this case would be the class name, but it would also accept the standard HTML button props. So yeah, oops. Sorry, I'm dropping a ton of things right now. Probably shouldn't readjust in the middle of a tutorial. Okay, so let's see. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So we're finishing up this arrow function. So this is why it's called an arrow function, because little arrow syntax. So it's basically saying that we're defining the button. Here are the props that get passed into the button or that the button will accept. And this is where the function block gets opened up. So open that up with curly brackets. And here's what we're going to do. Now, in JavaScript, typically the return of a function, so what the function returns to its caller, is inferred with some JavaScript magic that happens behind the scenes. But for React functional components, we always want to return JSX, which is HTML with extra steps. So similar to what you're seeing up here, this return statement, this function is returning this React JSX, right? We want to do the same thing over here. So we are going to return a button, and that button is going to contain the class name. And right now we're just going to have it return class name that gets passed in. I know, super revolutionary. And we're going to have it, this is called the spread operator. So what this is going to do is this is basically going to go over all of these 270-ish things, and it's going to expand them all into our component. So anything that gets passed in, any prop that gets passed in to this button component will then get forwarded on to this button. That will be returned back to its caller or the component that is actually using this button. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. And this is basically me doing absolutely nothing the way that it's currently defined, because now it's not doing anything special. The way this works, it works exactly as it did before. So where does this become useful? Well, let's say we want to abstract out all of the common classes. So let's take inline flex, item center, justify center. You see how as I'm highlighting this, it's highlighting it in the other classes? Well, what we want to do is we want to like take all these common classes, these are like, and call them the base classes, right? Because these are shared classes. We don't need to define them every single time. We define them one time in the button component, and we'll do it like so. So I did my homework already, and I already curated the list of the base classes. So I'll just do this real quick. So the base classes are as follows. Whoop. I am missing keystrokes. COVID was not easy on me. What I just did is I declared the base classes variable as a string. So this is basically, so here you're saying like, well, here, let me show you what happens. So if I say 1, it's going to scream at me because it's going to say, hold up. Am I tripping? Okay, yeah. So it is given an error saying type number is not assignable to type string. So this is basically enforcing that it has to actually be a string. So now it's a string. So I'll just get rid of this because we don't need it. I just wanted to get rid of the error that says that it's not being used. So let's go ahead and pass in these base classes. So as we already know, it's inline, flex, it's items, center, justify, center, gap 2, rounded, medium, padding x4, text small, font medium, what else? Transition all, focus, outline none, focus ring 2, focus ring offset 2. So these are all the classes that get used by all of the button components. Now what we want to do, I'm just going to add a comment over here. Say these are the base classes. Okay. Now what we want to do after this, I don't know why my shorthand isn't working. What the heck? Okay, there we go. So what we want to do now is we want to merge the base classes with any additional classes while removing duplicates slash conflicts. Yeah, I was going to say conflicting classes, but this is fine. So we're going to declare a new variable, and we're going to call it merged classes. And what this is going to do is this is going to use the Tailwind merge function, which is we installed earlier. So this is from the Tailwind merge package. And we're going to pass in so this is a function that's going to accept an array of strings. Okay. And the two strings that's going to accept is the base classes and the class name that got passed in. So this could be nothing, or sorry, there's someone yelling outside my door. Yikes. Whatever we pass in over here, it's going to merge it into this, and it's going to create this new variable. And I'm just going to add, for informational purposes, return the button component with the base classes and any additional classes. Yeah, that's fine enough. Okay, so now what we're going to do is instead of returning the class name, we're going to return the merged classes. Cool. So we save, and there we go. We now have a button component. So yeah, let's go ahead and use this thing. All right. So to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and scroll up to the top, or I'm just going to control find. Well, that's not helpful. So the first button. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a, let's stop, please. Thank you. Let's do a, I'll do a Control D. I was going to say Control Shift L and select all, but there's a component at the bottom that's using the button, and I don't want it to break that one. So now that I have selected these, so there's 6, cool. So I'm just going to do capital B button, and automatically updates the closing tag. You might, this might actually be a snippet that I have that automatically updates the closing tag. So yeah, you might actually need to go do this like for the closing tags as well. But in my case, I'll need to check like not snippet extension. I'll need to check what extension I have, if any, that does that. Unless like VS Code integrated it out of the box, in which case you can disregard everything I said for the past 30 seconds. So yeah, so now if I go ahead and save, it's actually not going to look any different because Tailwind merge is removing all the conflicts. So anything that got doubled, it's just ignoring it. But what I'll do to make my life a little bit easier, I'm just going to Control C, and you'll see these got used in all these places. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to Control D these, and there's a reason I'm doing them not all at once. So there we go. So we remove those from these components. The reason I'm not doing them all at once is because the ordering matters, and not all of these are in, like they don't all appear in this order in every component. So yeah, so this way I can just like, get as many as I can. So like this one we have gap 2 rounded MD border, but in this case it's gap 2 rounded MD PX, so that's why I can't do them all like this at once. So it's a little annoying, but it is what it is. So we'll just control this a couple of times, because like I said, this is already getting used, and realistically the way you would do this in the real world is not the way I'm doing it right now. You would just like do it out of the box like this, but this is just so I can like show and educate on like how this like componentization works, especially for like beginners. Because if you haven't dealt with React, and if you haven't dealt with React before, this stuff, or if you haven't done web development before, this stuff might be new to you, or doing it this way might be new to you. So At least this way you kind of like get to see the before and after and get an idea of like, oops, there we go. Okay. So I think px4, oh gosh, did I accidentally remove? No, we're fine. We're fine. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the rest of these so that because you get the idea. So I'll just be 1 second. Alrighty. So I went ahead and cleaned all of them up, removed all the classes that are not needed when using the button component. And like I said before, this can all be abstracted even further. Like you can make like variants that, you know, like have like conditional classes that get added based on like variants. You can say like button with a variant of destructive, and then if you have that, then it'll look at, okay, if it's destructive, then use these colors, so forth and so on. But for the purpose of this tutorial, I think that it's more important just to kind of like get the baseline down, and this is something that you can build up from here. I also don't think that it's right for me to make the decisions on how your code base should look, because everyone does things slightly differently. In this case, this is a general and broad enough way that almost all use cases where you're having like React and Tailwind can build up from here. So yeah, so now that we did this with the button, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm not gonna walk you through doing the exact same thing with the card and the icon. Instead, I'm just gonna like quickly do it just for the sake of like, you know, not making this video way too long. I'm just gonna go ahead and do it and then show what those classes will look like. As well as the rest of the code. And all of this code will be on GitHub, so that if you want to just copy it directly, you can do that. But it's essentially like more or less the same exact process that you just saw. So I will be right back in a second. All right. So I went ahead and did the same refactoring that I showed you for the button with the card and the input. But a quick note, oh, by the way, if you want to know where I get the emojis, it's from the Emojipedia website. So I do want to say, for the inputs, something that I did that was a little bit different was not a little bit different, it's almost identical, is you'll remember how with the input, we defined the div on the outside. And the reason I have it such that the input is actually returning a div with the input inside is because I want to have the label and the description be properties that can be passed onto the input. So what that looks like is here, where we have the input, you can pass in a description as a property or a label as a property. And this does the same thing that we were doing earlier, except you don't have to write that label and that description every single time. Now, all you have to do is pass in the actual text that will go into either label or the description, and it will provide them in this input component, and it'll return it in this way. And all you have to do is type in this. So yeah, so this is the refactor. Go ahead and pause it, update it, and what I would recommend is go to the GitHub link for this completed repo, if that helps. Just in case like you run into any issues, you can like make sure that you resolve those. Or if you just don't feel like copy and pasting everything, because it can get a little bit redundant. But yeah, so now in this vein, we're going to do a little bit more refactoring. But this refactoring is going to be a little bit more fun because we're actually going to introduce some, we're actually going to clean up the site. So we're going to be doing some refactoring while also making it look a little bit more like the final product. And the first thing that we're going to do in that vein is we're going to create the layout components. So these are going to be components that are not going to be used for, like they're not part of the UI component library that you're building. Rather, these are components that will get used in your app that get reused over and over again. So think about like the containers for these things, for like the individual like displays. We're doing this a ton of times. We're repeating it. Previously, we're just copy and pasting it, but it would be nice to have like a more consistent and reusable approach. So we're going to define several. The first one we're going to do is going to be the container. The second one we're going to do is going to be the description. So we don't have these yet, but we're essentially going to add like descriptions to all of the variants within each component type. And on that note, we're actually going to have, before the description, I should say 2 is actually heading, because we're going to have a heading for each one of these. So like primary button, secondary button, tertiary button. Then we're going to have a description for each one of those sections. And then lastly, we're going to have a preview, which is going to show, it's going to be like a little container to give a more, a nicer, more aesthetic preview for the actual component. So you can like differentiate between what is my site's UI and what is the preview area for the components that I'm showcasing. So let's go ahead and start with the container. So this one, we're also going to eventually move these to their own files, but for now, like I said, we're going to keep everything in the main file and refactor soon. So the first one is going to be container.tsx, and we're going to do what we did before. I'm going to use the snippets to save some time. So we're going to do RFC. I just need to get rid of this. And, oh, I didn't want it to look like this. I wanted it to be RAFC. So React arrow function, and it automatically does the file name, which in this case is app. We don't want it to be app. We want it to be container. And then what we're going to do is for the container, excuse me, the container is going to contain the title, description, and children. Children being everything that gets passed in between the open and close tags. So whenever you use this, it'll look something like this, right? So you'll have container. We'll just ignore title for now. Children would be, I'm a child. I spelled I'm wrong. This would be an example of a child, right? Anything that falls between the tags. It's a JSX keyword, standard JSX property, I should say. So you might be wondering, well, you didn't define the props, and that's because I'm actually going to use a different way to define the props now, just to show like some variations. So the way to define the props in this way is I'll actually just repeat title, and then I'll say title is of prop string. The prop title is of type string. Description is of type string. And I actually don't think I need a comma here. Or maybe I do. Interesting. Where was I? Oh, and then the last one is children, which is of type React node. And that's basically saying that this is going to be something that goes between the tags, like I showed you earlier. So I am going to save this just so that it like prettier does its thing and cleans it up. And oh, turns out I didn't need the commas and I wasn't crazy. Okay, so that's cool. So yeah, in here, what we're going to do is we're just going to open a parentheses, and we're going to return, excuse me, we're going to return the, we're going to return a header tag. And well, actually, let's add some classes. So we'll do header dot. We'll give it a bottom margin of 10, a border bottom, and we'll give it bottom padding of 10. And inside the header, we're going to have an h1 tag, which is going to have a block class, text 2XL, bold, bold, bold font, gray text. We'll go with the 800 since that's what we've been doing. And then we'll make it when it's small, or small and above, excuse me, it'll have text of 3XL. Yeah, cool. So the heading will be bigger with the screen size, and then on smaller screen sizes, or on like mobile, this is essentially mobile screen size, it'll be 2XL. So in here, we'll pass in the title property, or we'll return the title property that got passed in to the container component. Underneath here, we will have a paragraph tag, and we'll put a margin top of 2. We'll do large text, and we'll do gray 800 color. And here, this is where the description will go. And then no, actually, this is going to be underneath because this is going to be the children. So now we'll do div dot space y 10 dot md space y16, and here we'll do we'll pass in the children, and it's screaming at me. And the reason it's screaming at me is because you can't return multiple elements. You can only return one HTML element. So I always thought this was a janky workaround, but it is how you do it. I don't want to create another HTML element that has its own HTML attributes and all this other nonsense. I'd rather just like return a pseudo HTML element. And that's where we utilize I always thought this was a React workaround, but it might not be. It might make a lot more sense to others. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but it does work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this, so Control X, and I'm just going to open up and close a empty brackets. And this is shorthand for a React fragment. And what it basically does is it lets me say that trust me, bro, there is only one there's only one HTML element in here. Oh gosh, it's doing that thing with the leading semicolons. I hate when it does that. I think I got rid of the return, right? Is that why it's doing that? Oh boy, I'm a silly goose. That is why it's doing that. Okay, so X that. Open parentheses that, pass that in, save. It does this really annoying thing where it, if I save while there's a space, it'll think that I need to save that space, but I want to get rid of that. So yeah, so now it's one JSX tag or one HTML tag that has these two child elements passed in, the heading and the div, that is. So now that we have that container, we can go ahead and start using it. And this container specifically is to get rid of these divs over here. So what we're going to do now is I'm actually going to minimize all of these because it makes it a lot easier to read. So these are the containers for the individual component sections. So I'm just going to say this is a container, and it automatically changed the bottom tag. Going to do that again over here, and I know it's showing me an error. I'll address that in a second, and we'll pass in a container here. So the reason it's showing an error is because it has two required properties. If I hover over this, it'll say children element is missing the following type: a type string, description, React node. So, or yeah, title, description are missing, but the children are not, because these are the children. So what we're gonna do is in the container for the buttons, we're gonna give it a title of buttons, and for the description, we'll say that I always make that mistake. we'll say that and I have this written down somewhere, so let me look at it real quick. A button is a widget that enables users to action or event such as submitting a form, opening a dialog, canceling an action, or performing, I cannot type, a delete operation. And I'm pretty sure I got this from the accessibility guidelines site. So I'm not going to save yet because it's going to scream at me. Oh, it didn't scream at me. Okay, that's fine. So this is what it looks like. So it says buttons, and then has the actual buttons. Then it has this like little divider action going on, and then there's buttons again. Interesting. Why is it showing me buttons again? Well, it's because I didn't get rid of this one, which was the original one that was in there. So if I get rid of that, look at that. Look at how much cleaner it looks, right? It's a lot more spacing, but we'll address that in a little bit. But yeah, so it looks so much neater, right? If I full screen this, like it almost looks like a website that's coming to life. So I'm gonna quickly do that for the other two. So let's see. We have the next one was cards, and I'm just looking at my notes to make sure that I get these right. So we have cards and we have description, and in the description, a card is a flexible and extensible content container. And I'm going to get rid of this H1 because we don't need it anymore. Bye-bye. And then we save. And look at that. Cards is a flexible and extensible content container. I didn't just stutter really hard right now. You're imagining that. Okay. So the last one is inputs. And this one is going to be, whoa, no, not that. Hello. This one's going to be inputs, and underneath here, the description is going to be an input is a widget that allows users to provide data or specify options which can be submitted, that's too many T's, as part of a form, excuse me, or used to interact with and manipulate content on a web page. Save that. And there we go. Oh, wait, I gotta get rid of the last one. Okay. By the way, to get rid of a line that you're like currently clicked on, instead of highlighting the whole thing and escaping or deleting, you can just hit Control-Shift-K and it'll delete the line. There we go. So yeah, so that's a container. All right. So I'm going to quickly go through and create these last three components, and then we'll go through and implement them one by one. So for the heading, this one's going to be super simple. It's just a single H2 tag, but it's easier to have one single heading tag than to have to write these styles over and over again. So we're going to do RAFCEPT. Sorry, bad joke. So we're going to come here and we're going to call this heading. And actually, yeah, so the only thing this is taking is children. And those are, I'm just going to copy that from over here because no need to recreate the wheel, reinvent the wheel. So I'm going to save this real, okay. Don't panic. It's okay. It's because I am not using this correctly. Because it is trying to export the default app. That's why. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy pasta this twice. I'm going to change this to description, and I'm going to change this one to preview. And because they're all going to be doing the exact same thing for the most part, is just taking in whatever's passed in and returning a prettier version of it, or more accurately of its contents. I'm blabbering at this point. So we'll do H2 for the heading. We're going to do a H2 heading. We'll make the text large. Lord, text large. We'll do font bold, and we'll do text gray 800. Okay, and we'll pass in the children. If I can remember where there we go. So we save that. For the description, this one's just going to be a p tag. I'm actually just going to grab this because it's essentially the same exact thing, and paste that there. I'm going to change, I'm going to change children, or sorry, I'm going to change description to children, and I'm going to make it such that this is a margin top 1. Text gray 800 is fine, and I just want it to be, excuse me. Whoops, I tapped on something on my computer. Sorry about that. I'm going to make this a no large text. Cool. So the last, wait, actually, you know what? Let's make this a 600 instead, because it's a little bit much if it's like the same color as the heading. And then the last one is the preview. So this one's going to be pretty simple. It's just going to be a div that has a margin on top of it of 3. And then it's going to have a flex box that's going to be columns. It's going to be a stacked flex box, so everything's going to appear vertically. It's going to have a rounded border, and it's going to have an internal padding, so the space between it and its children of 6, and we'll give it a shadow of small. And then inside of that one, we'll do another div. This time it's going to be another flex box, but I want the contents inside to actually wrap. So, so like when, like for example, when the buttons, like if you have like a ton of buttons and like you get to the last button, it'll just like put the other button at like the next, like beginning of the next line, so to speak. So we'll do flex wrap, and we'll give a gap of 2 between elements. And lastly, we'll pass in the children. Cool. So next up, we're going to start using these. Okay, so let's go ahead and start playing around with these new components that we created. So what we're going to do is, for the buttons, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the destructive and like for each button variant and its destructive, for each button type and its destructive variant, I'm going to cut these, and I'm going to create a div, and inside that div I'm going to create, or I'm going to add the preview component, and then I'm going to pass in those buttons. So this is what that's going to look like. So this is the difference, right? This is the preview component, and then this is without the preview component. So we're going to do the same thing down here. Now, because, excuse me, because the preview component actually takes care of the gap between everything, we can actually get rid of all these. So I'm just going to delete that, and that's the gap at work. So we don't actually have to have anything between them. The gap will take care of, well, adding a gap. We don't need this this rule between the horizontal ruler between anything anymore. Oh, what you can do in VS Code is you can like multi-select. So I clicked and dragged that, and then if I hit Control, and then I can click and drag those, and now I have 2 cursors. So if I hit Control C, what I'm going to do is around the secondary button, I'm going to click above it, and then I'm going to click underneath it, and then I'm going to hit Control V, and it'll paste the 2 things that I copied in their appropriate spots. So when I hit save, now we have the preview component for the second ones. I'm gonna get rid of this horizontal ruling, And then I'm going to do the same thing for the tertiary button. Whoops. So you see how it added them in one place? What I need to do is I need to hit Control click above. And then underneath the tertiary destructive button, Control click again here, Control V. And now we have that preview. Oh, and I need to get rid of these two spans. So double clicked on that line, or triple clicked on that line, excuse me. Control D to select both. Control Shift K to get rid of the lines. Control S to save. And it got rid of those spans. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to get rid of all of these. So I'm going to hit Control Shift L on all of these spans because we don't need them anymore. And I'm just going to hit backspace. And I'm going to do the same thing with the horizontal rules. I'm going to triple click on those, Control Shift L, and get rid of all those because we don't need them anymore. Now, all the spacing and all that kind of stuff, that's all going to get taken care of by the excuse me, by the new container components that we created and their classes. So let's see. For the card, wait, where am I? Oh, went too far. So for the cards, we're going to put the div in the preview around the simple card, I believe. Yeah, just the simple card by itself, because that's its own little section. So we save that. So now this is what it looks like. We're going to do that for the header and the footer. They're both going to be in the same preview because I think they're both part of the same archetype, I guess. Control V. So save that. And we have the preview for these two now. And because of how I defined it, I believe, I don't know why it looks like that. There we go. So if I full screen it, they'll actually appear side by side. But once they occupy too much space, this is where the flex wrap comes in handy. Look what happens. Oh, it goes underneath it. So that's the flex wrap at work. So I'm going to go ahead and move this back to what it was. There we go. And we'll do that with the we'll do the same thing with the block cards. So we have the Vite card, and where's the last one? Oh, it's a silly goose. It's hiding. Okay. So we'll put click there, Control click there, paste, save. There we go. There's our block links. And lastly, we'll do it for the inputs. So for the inputs, we're going to do it around the basic input. So like, well, actually it'll be the basic and basic disabled. There we go. So basic and basic disabled. The next one is going to be the label. I think the label should be by itself. Right? Yeah. And then the description can be by itself. Well, yeah, that's fine. Actually, I like this better. Because that way, if you expand on this later, or if you like add a disabled state to your like showcase or whatever, it's like consistent. So yeah, there's our preview. So now let's go ahead and we're gonna add the the headings and the containers. Sorry, the headings and the descriptions. And we'll start with the buttons. So above the buttons, we're just going to add a heading, and we're going to add a description. And I am going to copy these so that I can paste them later on as we go. So now we'll put primary, and for the description we'll say primary actions should be obvious, solid, high contrast background colors work great here. All right. Now for the next preview, we will put secondary. This is for the secondary buttons. In the description, we'll say secondary actions should be clear but not prominent. Outline styles or lower contrast background colors are great options. Okay. And then lastly, for the tertiary, we will say that, let's see if I can spell it right the first time, tertiary, cool. And for the tertiary actions should be discoverable but unobtrusive. Styling these actions like links is usually the best approach. All right. Let's see. For the cards, we're going to do, oh, not inside the preview. What am I doing? We're going to do simple. And here we'll say simple cards display content and can provide a distinct link that can be selected. Save that. And you're kind of going to see, there you go, inputs, input, which is a widget. There. So simple cards display content. So you see how it's all coming together, right? So let's go ahead and move on to the next one. I'm just going to go ahead and paste these in those two. Cool. So now for the heading. So this one's just going to be a simple with a header and footer. And down here we'll say an option. Add an optional header and /or footer within a card. And then down here, we'll say that I believe I got this description from the ARIA page as well. This is a block link. And in the description, we'll say a simple card enhanced into a selectable block link. Cool. And then the last ones are the inputs. These are actually going to be really quick. So we'll add here, we'll just say basic, and this is just going to basic input with a placeholder. Down here, this one is a label variant, and this is a input with a label. Lord, I cannot type. Cool. And then the last one is the description, and this is an input with a description. I know it has both a label and description, but like for the purpose of the demo, that's it. So now when we check them out, look at that. Look how clean that looks. Isn't that beautiful? Let's just get rid of this because this is excess. All right. So yeah. So this is basically it. This is the first part of the tutorial. In the next part, we are going to get into theming, which will bring us to introducing dark mode and maybe making some further optimizations to the componentization and all that kind of stuff. But I think it should be really fun. It'll also introduce you to the React's context API and how to get like the system dark mode settings. So like if your iPhone or Android or Windows or Mac machine, if they have like dark mode system wide enabled, I'll show you how to actually how to have your site automatically detect that system setting and default to that mode. So it'll, like for example, for me, I like to use dark mode by default. So when I would use the website the first time, it'll default to the dark mode. And I'll show you how to like provide like the variation in styling to address some of the nuances of dark mode. So yeah, thank you very much for watching and for participating, and I hope you learned something.